The chalk path showed white before the sun did. Araminta Velicott walked it with her shawl held closed at the throat, and her boots ringing on ground, frozen hard in the night. There was ice in the cart ruts. The air smelled of cold flint and sheep. Below her to the left, the village of Winterset was dark except for one window at the smithy, where the fire was never quite let out. She had been 2 nights at the Carter's cottage. The youngest boy had taken a fever, and the mother was past managing, and there was nobody else to send for, because there never was. Araminta had kept the water cool and the room warm, which are 2 things that fight each other, and she had done it by carrying a basin back and forth until his skin stopped burning under her hand. He had woken and asked for bread. That was the whole of her reward, and it had been enough. There was ink under 2 of her fingernails. She had worked at them with a pumice stone on Tuesday, and it had not come out. When the Carter's wife reached for her hands to thank her, Araminta drew them back into her cuffs without thinking, the way another woman might straighten a bonnet. Her father would be asleep in his chair by now with the lamp still burning, because he did not care to be alone in the dark, and did not care to say so. She came to the old stile where the chalk path crossed the hedge, and she stopped there as she always did. The stone step was worn into a hollow in the middle. She put her hand flat on it. Below her, the valley came up gray out of itself, hedge by hedge, and a rook went over toward Ludwell, and nothing in the world wanted anything from her. She liked this hour for that reason. It was the only one in the day that asked her for nothing. Then she climbed over and went down to the house, because there was an assembly at Ludwell that evening, and Sibella had talked of it for a fortnight. The assembly rooms at Ludwell sat above the corn exchange and smelled of it. There were 40 couples and a hired quartet, and more candles than the subscription could afford, and everybody in the room knew everybody else, which was the pleasure of the place, and also the danger of it. Araminta stood by the second window with a glass of negus she had not drunk. She had been watching her sister for an hour without appearing to. Sibella was 17. Sibella danced the way she did everything, at full speed and without looking behind her. She had laughed too loudly at something, and Araminta had let it pass, because a girl of 17 is allowed to laugh. Then the music turned for the second figure, and Sibella was not in the set. Araminta looked once at the tea room, and once at the benches, and once at the door to the back stair, where a green shawl she had hemmed herself in September lay over the arm of a chair. Then she looked at Mr. Merrick Tolliver, who stood under the sconce by the mantel with his hands behind him, watching exactly the same doorway, with the pleasant, unhurried expression of a man watching a kettle he knows is about to boil. Araminta had perhaps 40 seconds. She knew the dance. She knew that on the turn of the 8th bar, every couple in the long set would be facing the top of the room. She set her glass down on the sill, unhurried, because a glass thrown down is a thing people remember. She walked out into the middle of the floor as though she meant to cross it. On the 8th bar, she let go. She let go of her knees first, and her spine after, and she made no sound at all, because women who cry out are helped up, and women who go down in silence are gathered round. Her shoulder took the boards. Her cheek took them after. The quartet lost the tune in a straggle, the fiddle last, and there was that half-second of nothing in which a whole room understands together. And then the noise came, and every eye in the assembly rooms at Ludwell was on the center of that floor. A knee came down beside her head. She did not know whose. She had her eyes shut, and she was busy being unconscious, and she was pleased with herself, which she would remember afterward with a particular kind of shame. A hand came under her jaw and turned her face up out of the dust. It was not a gentle hand. It was fast and certain and practiced, and it found the place under her ear where the pulse runs, and it stayed there. Then a mouth came down close to her ear, and a voice she had heard on exactly one afternoon of her life said very quietly, so that not one other person in that hot, crowded room could possibly have caught it. "Nice try." Araminta's eyes came open. She meant to say something. She had something ready. She was almost sure of it. But the ceiling had begun to slide, and the candles had doubled and gone soft at the edges, and the roar of the room came at her thin and far off. She felt the hand at her jaw change. It was the strangest thing that happened to her that night. She felt the hand stop being certain. She felt two fingers press harder, hunting, and slide, and stop again. And she heard the breath go out of the man kneeling over her in one short, flat sound, as though he had put his own hand on something hot. "No," he said. "Not to her." She was going down through the floor by then. She was aware of being taken up under the arms and the knees, with no ceremony whatever, and of her own head against wool that smelled of cold air and horses and smoke. She was aware, last, of a small hard sound on the boards behind her, which was her mother's garnet drop coming out of her ear and going away into the dust under 40 pairs of dancing feet. She came back on a horsehair sofa with the noise of the assembly pushed down to a hum. There was a coat over her, dark and very fine, and much too heavy, laid on without regard for what it cost. Her ear was cold where the earring had been. "Sibella," she said. "Your sister is here," said a woman she did not know. "Crying enough for the pair of you." And there was Sibella at the end of the sofa, with her hair coming down, and her face wet, and her green shawl over her arm, gathered up and put on and pulled straight, in a room full of women who had watched her elder sister fall down in front of the entire subscription. Nobody in Ludwell would talk about a green shawl on the back stair tonight. It had worked. Araminta let her head go back against the horsehair, and it was then that she heard the voice again in the passage outside, asking a question of somebody in that same flat, unhurried way. She knew the voice before she could put a face to it. She had had that face in her mind for 2 years, off and on, at bad hours. Crispin Hallowell, Duke of Thelbury. The drawing room at Stanbury had been full of yellow light. That was the thing she remembered first, always, before any of the rest. June, herself at 20, and 1, and 4 other people in the room. Her father had brought her. There were debts by then, and a letter, and a great deal of talk in the family of what extraordinary fortune it was that His Grace should take an interest in the affairs of a Winterset attorney, and how a girl who had been sensible all her life would surely be sensible now. He had offered her marriage in front of the 4 of them, plainly. He had said what the settlement would be, and what it would clear. And he had said one sentence about his daughter, needing a mother, that Araminta had not properly heard at the time. He had not said one word about her. She had stood in all that yellow light with her father's hand shaking on the back of a chair, and she had heard herself say it. "Your Grace mistakes me for a charity, and himself for a cure." 4 witnesses, a duke, in his mother-in-law's drawing room with the windows open onto the lawn. Her father did not speak to her for 9 weeks. She had been proud of the sentence for about half an hour. She had carried it home like a coin. Then the pride went off it the way heat goes off a stone, and what was left was that she had refused the one thing that would have saved every person she loved, with a piece of cleverness, in public, to a man who had buried his wife 18 months before, in front of that wife's own mother. She had never taken it back. She had never once wished the answer different. She had wished the sentence different every week for 2 years. And now the coat over her was his, and the doctor already sent for was his. There was one man in England to whom Araminta Vellacott could not be in debt for so much as a glass of water. She was now in debt to him for her sister's entire future. And he knew, because she had felt him know it. kneeling on the boards with his fingers under her ear, that whatever else she had been doing on that floor, she had not been perfectly well. The carriage came into the lane at Marlcote at 9 the next morning, which was 3 hours earlier than any carriage had ever come there. Araminta heard it from the back kitchen. She was in yesterday's dress, with her hair pinned anyhow, because Nan had the fires to do and could not be spared, and because there had seemed no reason on earth to expect anybody. She looked out at the lane. Then she looked at the room she was standing in, and she saw it the way a stranger would see it, all at once, which is a thing that happens to poor people about twice a year, and never at a convenient moment. The front parlor had not had a fire in it since October. There were 2 chairs in there and a table, and the good carpet had gone to Ludwell in the spring to be sold, and the mark of it was still on the boards, paler than the rest, in the exact shape of what was missing. "Nan," she said, "the front parlor, and do not light it. There is nothing to light it with." She met him in the hall herself. He came in out of the cold with his hat already in his hand. Behind him came a short gray man with a bag, who was introduced as Dr. Amberley of Ludwell, and who had plainly been got out of bed and paid a great deal not to mind it. The Duke of Thelbury was taller than she had allowed for in 2 years of remembering him. He filled the hall, which was not difficult, because the hall was narrow. He looked at the paler patch on the boards through the parlor door for perhaps a second and a half. Then he looked away from it, and didn't look at it again for the whole of the visit, which Araminta noticed, and which she didn't thank him for at the time. "Miss Vellicott." "Your Grace." He put out his hand. There was something small in it, and she knew what it was before she saw it, and something went hard and tight in the middle of her chest. Her mother's garnet drop lay on his glove. The wire was bent where a heel had gone over it. The stone was whole. "I had the floor swept," he said. "Twice. The second time by candle." She could not speak for a moment. She took it. Her fingers were not quite steady, and she hated that, and there was nothing whatever to be done about it. "Thank you. It is not a kindness. It is your property, and it was on my account that it went into the dust." He turned to the doctor. "This is Dr. Amberley. He has come to look at you. You may, of course, send him away. I would rather you did not. You presume a great deal." "I do." Behind her, at the turn of the stair, a door opened. Her father came down. Araminta did not turn round to watch him do it, because she knew how it looked, and because there is a particular way that a man comes down a staircase at 9 in the morning when he has been at the decanter until 3, and she had watched it enough times to know it by the sound alone. Mr. Ambrose Vellicott had been a good attorney once, in a small way, in a small county. He still had the voice for it. "Your Grace does us a very great honor." "Mr. Vellicott," and the Duke of Thelbury bowed to him. It was not a deep bow. It was not required at all. It was the bow one gentleman gives another in a public street, given to a ruined, half-drunk attorney in a cold hall with the smell of last night on him, and given without one flicker of anything behind it. Araminta looked at the wall. Her father talked about the honor and the weather and the state of the Ludwell road, and the Duke let him, and answered him properly, and then said he had detained Miss Vellicott long enough from the doctor, and her father went away into the study to be important about nothing. The doctor took her into the parlor with Nan for a chaperone, and the door shut. He asked when she had last eaten meat. He asked how many hours she slept, and then asked it again in a different way, because he had not believed the first answer. He held her wrist a long time. He looked at her hands and turned them over, and looked at the ink under her nails, and said nothing about it, which told her he was cleverer than she had hoped. "Miss Vellicott," he said at the end, "how long have you been going on like this?" "Like what?" "On nothing. On 4 hours and no meat, and a great deal of work you do not name to anybody." I am perfectly well. You went down on a ballroom floor in front of the county. I fainted, Araminta said. Women faint. It is very nearly a profession. Dr. Amberley looked at her over the top of his spectacles for rather a long moment. You did not faint, he said. You dropped. Your shoulder is black and your cheek is grazed, and there is not one mark on either of your hands. And a woman who goes down without meaning to puts out a hand, whether she wishes to or not. There is a difference, and I have seen both. But you were also running a fever of some days standing, and your pulse this morning is not what I should like it to be. And both of those things are true at once, which is why I am not going to argue with you about the first. At the door, he stopped. I am obliged to tell His Grace something. Tell him I am well. I shall tell him you are tired, said the doctor, which has the advantage of being true. Araminta stood in the cold parlor with her hands folded and looked at the pale patch on the boards where the carpet had been, and listened to two men's voices going quietly in the hall, and could not make out one word. Then the doctor went out to the carriage, and the Duke came in and shut the door behind him. He did not sit. There were two chairs, and he looked at them, and did not take either, which she understood, because if he had sat, she would have had to sit, and she was steadier standing. I will not ask you what you were doing, he said. Then we shall get on very well. You went down on the 8th bar of the second figure. You set your glass on the sill first. You chose the middle of the floor, which is where the sound carries, and you turned every head in that room away from something. He said it the way a clerk reads back an account. I do not require to be told what. I am telling you that I saw it, and that you may correct me if I have got any part of it wrong. Araminta said nothing. She could have corrected him. One sentence about a green shawl and a back stare, and he would have understood it in half a breath, and it would have cost her nothing but her sister's name in the mouth of a man who had no reason on earth to keep it. No, she said. You have got none of it wrong. Thank you. That is not an explanation. I did not ask for one. He turned his hat once in his hands. Miss Vellicott, I am going to say something now, and I would be obliged if you would let me finish it, because I have been composing it since 4 this morning, and I shall lose it if I am interrupted. Very well. Your father's affairs are known to me. They were known to me 2 years ago, which is why the settlement I named at Stanbury was the size it was. I am not going to speak of Stanbury. I am going to say that whatever stands between us has nothing to do with a cold parlor and a girl of 23 living on 4 hours. He stopped. He was not comfortable. She could see that he was not comfortable, and it was the first thing about him she had ever liked. I will settle the debts, he said. All of them. There is no condition on it of any kind. It is not an offer of marriage, and it will never be spoken of as one. You need not receive me afterward. You need not thank me. You need never be in the same room with me again as long as you live. The clock in the study struck the half-hour through the wall. No, said Araminta. He did not move. You have not considered it. I considered it 2 years ago, in a room with a great deal of yellow light in it, and I have considered it every day since, and the answer this morning is the same as the answer that afternoon. The answer that afternoon was to a proposal of marriage. The answer this morning is to money. Your sister is 17, he said very evenly. In 2 years, she will want a season, or she will want a husband, or she will want simply to be somewhere that is not this house. Whatever you are protecting her from, you cannot go on protecting her from it on the floor of a public assembly. That was the nearest either of them came, that morning, to saying it out loud. And Araminta felt the whole cold room go still around her, because he was entirely right, and because she could not take 1 penny of his money, and because she could not tell him why. No, she said again. He looked at her for a long moment. She saw him understand something. She saw him arrive quite quietly at the fact that a woman who will refuse a thing she needs that badly, twice, without one reason offered, is a woman who has a reason she is not going to offer. She watched him decide not to hunt for it. "Then tell me what you will take," he said, "because I am not going out of this house with nothing in my hands. You have brought me my mother's earring. That was not mine to keep. Ask me for something." She had not expected to be given the choosing of it. 2 things. "Name them. You will not speak of what you saw last night. Not to your household. Not to your sister-in-law. Not in a letter. Not in 20 years. Done. That is one. There is a gentleman who is standing under the sconce by the mantel with his hands behind him. Mr. Merrick Tolliver, of Ludwell. He is not a gentleman, whatever he is called." "I know Mr. Tolliver." "I would like you to speak to him," said Araminta. "Once, in front of other people, about the weather or the Ludwell Road, or anything at all in the world, so long as it is public and so long as it is brief. I want him to understand that the Duke of Thelbury knows his name." There was a pause. Then the Duke of Thelbury smiled, which she had not seen him do before, and which did not last, and which was not a pleasant expression in the least. "That," he said, "will cost me 1/4 of an hour, and nothing else, and it will be more use to you than 4,000 pounds. Where did you learn to ask for the cheap thing? I have never in my life been able to afford the other kind." He put his hat on. At the door he stopped, and he did not turn round. "He was watching that doorway too," he said, "last night. So it is not only me who saw." And then he went out to his carriage, and Araminta stood in the cold parlor with her mother's earring closed in her fist, and understood that in buying her sister 4 hours of safety, she had put her own name into the hands of the 2 men in Ludwell, who now both knew there was something to find. The note came 4 days later, and it was not from him. It came on a half sheet of paper that had been cut down from a larger one with something blunter than scissors. The hand was careful and slow, and the letters were too big, the hand of somebody who does not write often enough to have got fast at it. "Miss Vellicott, they say you did not put out your hands. Nobody falls without putting out their hands. How did you do it? Clemency." Araminta read it 3 times in the lane, with the boy from Caudry Hall holding the pony's head and waiting because he had been told to wait. "Am I to carry an answer back, miss?" "You are. Tell me. Does Lady Clemency write many letters?" The boy considered this with great seriousness. "No, miss," he said. "Lady Clemency don't hardly talk." The carriage came for her on the Thursday, and Caudry Hall was worse than she had feared, because it was beautiful. She had prepared herself for grandeur. Grandeur can be disliked. What she had not prepared for was a long, pale house, sitting in a fold of the downs, with the light coming off it, and a lime avenue that somebody had planted 200 years ago, knowing perfectly well he would never see it finished. Inside it smelled of beeswax and cold flowers and stone. Her shoes were thin, and she could feel the chill of the floor through them, and her footsteps were louder than she wanted them to be, and there was a great deal of wall. The butler took her up. On the first landing they passed a door with a key in the lock, turned, which she noticed because there is no reason to lock a door inside a house where 40 people work. Further along there was a place on the wall, above a table with nothing on it, where the paper had faded in the shape of a picture. The picture was still there. It had been turned to face the wall and left that way, and the dust on the top of the frame said it had been left that way for years. She did not ask. She counted both of them, and she went on up. Lady Clemency Hallowell was 11 years old, and she was sitting on the window seat of the schoolroom with her feet drawn up under her and a slate on her knees that she was not using. She was very thin, She had her father's gray eyes, and none of his stillness, and she looked at Araminta the way a bird looks at a room it has got into by accident. "You came," she said. "You asked me a question. It would have been rude not to. Nobody answers my questions. They say what a strange thing to want to know." Clemency put the slate down. "How did you do it? Who told you about my hands? Hannah? Who does the linen?" Her sister was carrying the urns, and she said the lady went down like a dropped coat and never put out a hand. The gray eyes did not move off her. Nobody falls without putting out their hands. I have tried it on my bed 40 times, and I cannot. Araminta thought about a promise a man had made her in a cold parlor, and how completely he had kept it, and that the one person in the county who had worked it out was 11 years old and had never been told a thing. Araminta sat on the end of the window seat, which put her lower than the child, and she did it on purpose. "How much do you want to know? All of it. Then stand up." Clemency stood up so fast she nearly went over. "The first thing," said Araminta, "is that you must never do it on stone, and you must never do it to anybody who is trying to help you. I want your word on both before I say anything else, because if you break your head on a flagstone, your father will never forgive me, and he will be right. I promise. The second thing is that everybody watches the wrong part. They watch the face." Araminta stood up too. Nobody in the world has ever been able to tell a real feint from a false one by the face. What gives it away is the hands. The hands. When you truly go, your hands do nothing. They stay wherever they were. She held her own out, loose. A person who is pretending puts a hand out to save herself. She cannot help it. That is how they are found out, every time. And once you know it, you can never watch a woman faint in a play again without laughing. Clemency's mouth had come open slightly. "So you did not put your hands out." "I did not put my hands out." "Did it hurt?" "A great deal," said Araminta. "It still does." "That is the third thing, and it is the one nobody tells you. It is not a clever trick. It is a bruise you agree to have." The child stood on the schoolroom carpet and looked at her, and Araminta watched a whole set of small doors open behind that face. Then Clemency let go of her knees and went down on the carpet in silence, with her hands loose at her sides, and lay there entirely still, with her cheek on the wool. Araminta did not go to her. She waited. After a moment, one gray eye opened. "Was that right?" "Very nearly. You bent one knee at the last, because you were being careful of the floor, and being careful is the whole of what shows. Do it again, and think about something else while you do it. Think about a horse." Clemency got up and did it again, thinking about a horse, and it was better, and she knew it was better, and she came up off the carpet with the wool print on her cheek, and the whole of her face changed, and she laughed. It was one short, high sound, and it stopped almost at once, as though the child had surprised herself with it, or as though the room had. Araminta heard, behind her, a very slight sound at the schoolroom door, which was the sound of a large man in the doorway deciding not to come in. She did not turn round. She stayed an hour and a half. They went from fainting to other useful things. How to have a headache that cannot be argued with, which requires only a steady face. How to sit through a long, dull dinner without appearing to want to die, which Araminta considered the most valuable of the lot, and which took the longest to teach. When the light began to go, a footman came up and said that His Grace hoped Miss Vellicott would take some tea before the carriage went, and that he was in the small library. The small library at Caudray was the only room she had been in that day that had been used. There were 3 books on the arm of a chair, and a fire that had been lit for hours, and not for her benefit, and nobody rang for anybody, and he poured the tea himself. She laughed, he said. She did. I have not heard that in 3 years. He handed her the cup. Their fingers did not touch. I am not going to make a speech about it. I want you to know that I heard it. That is all. Araminta drank her tea. It was very hot and very good, and she was thirstier than she had known. He sat down opposite her and put his cup on the table and did not drink from it. I have something to say, and I would rather say it badly at once than well in a fortnight, he said. I said 2 words to you on the floor of the assembly rooms at Ludwell. Your Grace need not. I need to. He looked at his hands. Nice try. That is what I said. To a woman lying on boards in front of 200 people. You were not wrong. I wasn't wrong. That is precisely the difficulty. He turned one hand over and looked at the palm of it as though the answer were written there. I saw the glass go down on the sill. I saw you count. I have a very good eye for a room, and I have always been proud of it. And I knelt down beside you with my fingers on your pulse, feeling extremely pleased with myself. And I spent 2 seconds telling you so. The fire moved. A log went down half an inch and settled. 2 seconds, he said, in which I was not attending. And then I found your pulse properly, and it was going like a bird in a box, and your skin was hot under my hand, and I understood that both things were true at the same time, and that I had been clever at a woman who was in fact ill. Araminta held her cup and did not say anything, because there was nothing to say that would not have been a kindness, and she did not think he had come here to be given one. My wife, he said, fainted for 3 months before anybody believed she was ill. The clock on the mantel went on. Somewhere below in the house a door closed. She was not a complainer. She made a joke of it. She fainted at Michaelmas, and she fainted twice in November, and each time she got up and said something amusing about it. And I laughed, and her mother laughed, and the physician from London said it was her nerves and her stays and the London air, and she said yes, very likely, and went on. And in March she was dead, and it had been in her the whole time, and I had been in the room for every single one of those faints, and I had never once put my hand on her wrist and counted. He stopped. He picked up his cup at last and drank from it and put it down. So, when I went down on my knee at Ludwell, he said, and put 2 fingers under a woman's ear and made a joke, I want you to understand that I was not being cruel to you. I was being cruel to myself 3 years too late, and you happened to be lying underneath it. The room was very quiet. Thank you, said Araminta. I am not asking to be forgiven. It was a small thing, said quietly, and nobody heard it, but you and me. That is why it wants forgiving, she said. The things nobody hears are the only ones that need it. The rest get put right by other people. He looked up at her then, and she felt the whole weight of that look, and she did not look away from it. May I ask you something? He said. Yes. 2 years ago at Stanbury, in that room. He said it without any softening at all. I have thought about your sentence a great deal. It was a very good sentence. I want to know whether you meant it or whether you found it. Araminta set her cup down in the saucer with great care, because her hand had begun to shake and she did not intend to let it be seen. I found it, she said. Ah. I want to be exact, because I have had 2 years to be exact about it, and I have never once had anybody to be exact to. She put her hands in her lap. The answer was true. I would give the same answer tomorrow. You offered me a settlement in front of 4 people, and you never said one word about me. And if I had taken it, I would have spent 30 years in a large house being grateful. And I have watched a woman do that. And she died of it, before she died of anything else. Then what did you find? The sentence, Araminta's voice had gone very quiet, but it did not waver. The answer was mine. The sentence was vanity. I could have said no in 4 words and gone out of the room. Instead, I made something clever. Because there were 4 people watching, and because I was 20, and 1, and because I had never in my life been the most interesting person in a room, and I discovered that afternoon that I could be, if I was cruel enough. The fire cracked. "You had buried your wife 18 months before," she said. And I said it in front of her mother, and it went round 3 counties in a week, and I have been ashamed of it every week for 2 years. And being ashamed of it is not the same as taking it back, and I am not going to pretend to you that it is." He did not speak for a long time. "No," he said at last, "it is not the same. I am glad you did not pretend." She discovered that she had been holding her breath and let it go. "I should like to ask you for something," he said. "It is not money. You have refused money twice, and I have accepted that, and I will not raise it again." "Then what?" He turned his cup a quarter turn on the table, which she was coming to understand was the only nervous thing he did. "My daughter has asked me a question every day since Thursday," said the Duke of Thelbury. "It is the same question, and she asks it in the morning and again at night. And she has not asked me anything twice in 3 years, and I do not know what to do about it. So I am going to ask you for something that will do you a great deal of harm, and I am going to tell you plainly that it will, and then I am going to ask you anyway." "Twice a week," he said. "Thursdays and Sundays. Not letters, not calls, lessons with a name on them, so that anybody who asks is told the same thing by everybody, and there is nothing to find out. My daughter is to be taught. You are to teach her." "Taught what?" "I have not the least idea. You will decide it, and I will not ask." He sat back. "Now the harm. You are a gentleman's daughter of no fortune, and I am a widower with a title. And if you come into this house twice a week for a year, then in a year every person in this county will have decided what you are, and they will not have decided kindly, and nothing I do or say will alter it. If you refuse me, I shall think you perfectly right." Araminta looked at the fire. She thought about a green shawl on a back stair. She thought about a child lying still on a schoolroom carpet with her hands loose at her sides, doing it properly at the second attempt. "Thursdays and Sundays," she said. They were careful for 11 weeks, and being careful is a great deal harder than being reckless, because it has to be done every single day. The lessons had a name on them. The name was Italian and drawing, and there was even a little Italian and a little drawing, so that if anybody looked, there would be something to find. Araminta came at 2 and went at 5. She was never once alone in a room with him with the door shut. Clemency was present, or a governess was present, or the schoolroom door stood open onto the landing, and it stood open on purpose, and neither of them ever said so. Clemency began to talk. It came on the way water comes back into a dry pipe, in coughs and rushes, badly at first. In the second week, she asked whether Araminta had a sister. In the 4th, she talked for 40 minutes about a pony she had been promised and not given. In the 6th, she said, out of nothing at all, in the middle of a page of Italian, that her mother had smelled of orange flower water, and that nobody in the house would say so. Araminta put the book down and said that was a very good thing to know about a person, and Clemency picked the book up again and went on with the verbs. The letters were the other half of it, and they were not letters. They were notes. He sent them by the boy with the pony, 4 or 5 lines, never about her. A hawk had taken up in the stable clock tower and would not be moved. The tenant at Combe End had made a great deal of ice on his own pond by accident, and was now charging the village a penny to slide on it. She answered the same evening, every time, in 4 or 5 lines, and hers were never about him. A cat had come to the door at Marlcote and would not leave. Her father had won 2 shillings at whist and had spent the following day being a man of business. Neither of them ever wrote one word about money, or about Stanbury, or about the middle of a floor on the 8th bar. That subject was shut by an agreement neither of them had made out loud. What it cost her was the hours, because the copying still had to be done. Bewley and Rouse of Bristol paid 1 shilling and 3pence a folio for a fair hand, and paid it promptly, and they had been paying it promptly for 2 years, to a copyist they had never met, and believed to be a man named Mr. A. Vellicott, and it was the only money in that house that came in without being ashamed of itself. It had been done between 8 and midnight. Now it was done between midnight and 4, because Thursdays and Sundays were gone, and the work did not know that, and the sums did not care. She got thinner. She knew it because her mother's ring turned on her finger. Dr. Amberley met her in the street in Ludwell in the 3rd week and stopped, and looked at her, and said nothing for a moment. "I have not been sent for," he said. "I tell you, so that you know, that whatever he knows, he did not have it from me. And I will tell you the other thing, which is that a woman may burn a candle at both ends for 2 years. She may not do it for 3. He put his hat back on and went on up the street. The frost went out of the ground in the 8th week, and Mr. Merrick Tolliver came out of the door of the Bell in Ludwell as she was going past it, at exactly the moment she was going past it, which Araminta did not for 1 second believe was an accident. Miss Vellicott, what a piece of good fortune. Mr. Tolliver, I hear you are at Cadre Hall a good deal. Italian. He said the word as though it had a smell. How very accomplished you are, and how quiet you have kept it. There is a great deal about me that has not the least interest for you. There you are wrong. He fell into step beside her, which she could not prevent without stopping in the street, and she wasn't going to stop in the street. I have been in Bristol, business of my own, attorneys' offices, a good deal of waiting about in outer rooms. Araminta went on walking. Her boots went on hitting the pavement one after another, and she made quite sure of that. "Do you know," said Mr. Tolliver pleasantly, "that a great deal of copying work goes out of Bristol into the country, and the firms never see the hands that do it. They know a name and a village and where to send the money, and that is the whole of their acquaintance. A man might be anybody. A man might not be a man at all." The pavement was very level and very ordinary, and she walked along it. "You have a point, Mr. Tolliver, and you are 3 streets from it." "No point in the world." He stopped at the corner and put his hand to his hat, all courtesy. "I wonder about things, that is all. It is my only amusement in a small county. I wondered, for instance, why a young lady who is at Cadre Hall twice a week, and who is in the way of being spoken to kindly by a duke, should trouble herself to be at Bewley and Rouse's convenience for 1 and 3pence a folio." He smiled at her, and it was a perfectly pleasant smile, and he went away down the street toward the Corn Exchange. Araminta stood on the corner of the Ludwell High Street in the thin March sun, and found that she could not entirely feel her hands. He did not know. She held on to that. He wondered. Wondering is not knowing, and a man who knew would not have said 1 word of it in the street. But a man who wonders that accurately is one afternoon in a Bristol outer room from the end of everything, and there was nobody in the world she could tell. The snow came late that year, at the end of March, out of a clear morning, the way the worst of it does. It came down while she was in the schoolroom, and by 4:30, the boy came up to say the Ludwell Road was closing, and the carriage would not answer. She stayed. It wasn't decided by either of them. A bedroom was made up, and a note went to Marlcote by a man on a horse who had been born in that snow and thought nothing of it. They ate at 7, the 3 of them, and Clemency talked for most of it. At 9, she was taken up to bed and came back down twice for things she did not need, and then went up for good. And then there were 2 people in a small library and a great deal of snow. They did not sit close. She had a chair on one side of the fire, and he had the other, and there were 4 feet of Turkey carpet between them, and the door stood open onto the hall, as it always did, and the house made its noises around them. Nothing happened. It was the longest hour of her life. He read or held a book. She had her work basket and did not open it. Once the wind changed and the snow came against the tall window with a sound like sand thrown, and they both looked up at the same moment, and then both looked away. At some point she put her hand up to shade her eyes, because the lamp on the table was in them. He got up and moved the lamp to the far side of the table, so that the light came from behind her shoulder instead, and sat down again, and said nothing about it, and did not look at her while he did it. Araminta looked at the fire for a long time after that. "Your Grace." "Yes. I'm going to say something, and I don't know how it ends, so I would be obliged if you would let me get to the end of it before you are kind about it, because if you are kind, before I have finished, I shall stop." He shut the book. He put it on the arm of the chair. "Say it." "When I refused you at Stanbury," said Araminta, "I told you the truth in the wrong words. And I have been sitting in this room for an hour, thinking that I have never in 2 years been in a room with anybody who did not want something from me, and that I am in one now, and that I do not know what to do with my hands." The fire moved. "I have not been able to name a thing for 11 weeks, she said. "And I find I would rather name it badly than go on not naming it, because I am so very tired, and because when the snow goes, I shall have to go home, and I would like to have said it in a room with the door open where nothing can be made of it." He did not move at all. She had the impression of a man holding himself extremely still on purpose. "Then say it," he said. She opened her mouth. There was a sound in the hall. It was a small, correct sound. It was the sound of a footman who has come to a doorway and waited a moment out of good manners, and then coughed, and there he was in the doorway with a salver in his hand and 1 card on it, and snow melting on the shoulders of his coat. "Your Grace, forgive me. A carriage has come up from the Ludwell Road." "Nothing is coming up from the Ludwell Road tonight." "It has come, Your Grace." The footman looked, very briefly, at Araminta, and then at the carpet. "The Dowager Countess of Stanbury is in the hall." The yellow room at Cadre faced east, and at 9:30 there was so much light off the snow outside that it hurt to look at the windows. Araminta had slept 4 hours in a bed, too soft for her, and come down in yesterday's dress, because there was nothing else in the house that was hers, and she had decided on the stairs that she was not going to apologize for it to anybody. The Dowager Countess of Stanbury was already seated when she came in. She did not rise. She was 70, or near it, and she was very upright and very thin, and she had her granddaughter's mouth exactly, which was a thing Araminta had not prepared for, and which took the ground from under her in the first half-second. On the low table between the 2 chairs, there was a japanned box with the lid off. It was full of letters. They had been tied in bundles with tape, and the tape had been untied and retied a great many times. "Miss Vellicott, sit down." Araminta sat down. "Tea? Thank you. No." Very sensible. It is a foolish way to begin a conversation of this kind, and I have never known why we all do it. Lady Drusilla Ferrand folded her hands. "You slept in this house last night." "The Ludwell Road was closed." "I am aware of it. My own carriage was 4 hours coming up from Ludwell." She said it without any warmth at all. "I am not accusing you of anything. I am establishing what happened, because in a fortnight, what happened will have stopped mattering, and what is said will be the whole of it. Then somebody wrote to you. Somebody always writes to me. The old woman's mouth did something that was not a smile. It is the only office left to a woman of my age. I am written to. She reached out and put 2 fingers on the japanned box. These are my daughter's letters. Everyone she wrote me from this house, from her marriage to the February before she died. There are 209. I read them a great deal, which is a foolish habit, and I do not recommend it. She took her hand back. I tell you they are here so that you understand that when I speak of this family, I am not speaking as a visitor. I understand it. Good. Then I shall be quick, and I shall be accurate, and you will find nothing in what I say that is untrue. That is the only kindness I have to offer you, and I am aware it is a poor sort. The light off the snow moved on the ceiling. You are 23. You have no fortune and no connection. You are the daughter of an attorney in a village of 400 people. You have been in this house twice a week since January, under a pretense of Italian that neither the servants nor the county believe. And last night, you slept in it. My granddaughter is 11. In 7 years, she will be looked at by every family in England worth marrying into, and every one of them will send a man to ask questions in the bell at Ludwell, and the answers he gets will be about you. Araminta did not speak. That is the first thing. Here is the second, and I would rather say it to you than let you hear that I have said it to others. Lady Drusilla's voice did not change at all. 5 years ago, your father was employed in the management of a trust belonging to a widow of this county, named Mrs. Peveril. £1,140 went out of that trust and didn't come back. It was not prosecuted because Mrs. Peveril was persuaded by 2 gentlemen of the neighborhood that a prosecution would cost her the remainder and gain her nothing. And she was old, and she was frightened, and she signed what she was asked to sign. The room was very quiet. Araminta could hear snow coming off the roof in slabs, somewhere above and behind her, and going down into the shrubbery. Do you deny any part of that? No, said Araminta. You do not defend him. I have never once defended him. No, said the old woman, and something went across her face too fast to read. I did not think you would. That is not to your discredit, and it makes no difference whatever, because a girl does not choose her father, and the world does not care. And in 7 years, when the man from London is sitting in the bell at Ludwell, he will not be told that you never defended him. He will be told the amount. She let that sit. Now, the third thing, and then I have done. My daughter's marriage settlement provides that, in the event of her death, I may require the removal of any child of the marriage to my own establishment in London for the purpose of education, at my own charge, at any time before that child's 16th year. My son-in-law cannot prevent it. He has known of the provision for 3 years, and he has never once asked me to give it up, because he is an honest man, and he knows what it is worth to Clemency to have a grandmother who is written to. She looked at Araminta down the length of the room. I am not threatening you with it, she said. I am telling you it exists. If I take Clemency to London in April, she will be in Green Street within the month, and she will have masters and cousins and a season in due time, and there will be nothing said of her in the bell at Ludwell at all. I should be very sorry to do it. I shall do it if I must. Araminta looked down at her own hands. There was ink under 2 of the nails. There always was now. May I ask you a question, Lady Drusilla? You may ask it. Your daughter fainted for 3 months before anybody believed she was ill. The old woman's hand, lying open on the arm of the chair, closed. Who told you that? He did. Then he had no business. He had every business. It was his to tell. Araminta kept her voice low, because it was the only way she could keep it at all. I do not ask it to wound you. I ask it because I want to know one thing, and you are the only person alive who can tell me. Did you believe her? The clock ticked 8 or 9 times. No, said Lady Drusilla Ferrand. No. I laughed. The old woman was looking at the japanned box. She made it amusing, and I laughed. And I was the first in the room to laugh, every time, because she was my daughter, and I was proud of how well she carried it. I laughed in November, and she was dead in March, and I have had 3 years and 209 letters to be sure of the order of it. She looked up. So now you know why I am here, Miss Vellicott, and it is not what you think. I am not here because you are poor. I am here because I sat in rooms for 3 months with a woman who was dying, and I looked at her, and I did not see her. And I will not stand in this house and watch a second young woman be brought into it, and admired, and written to, and made a great deal of, by a man who is very kind, and very busy, and very much accustomed to being told he has an excellent eye. Because he has not got one, he looks at what he expects. He did it to my daughter, and he will do it to you, and you will not tell him you are ill either, because women like you never do, and I will have to be in the room again. Araminta found, to her own great surprise, that her eyes were stinging, and that it was not for herself. That is the truest thing anybody has said to me in 2 years, she said. It is not intended as a compliment. I did not take it as one. Araminta stood up. She had not been invited to stand. She saw the old woman register it, and she went on standing. I am not going to argue with any of your 3 things, because they are all correct. My father did what you say he did. The county says what you say. It says. And you may take Clemency to London tomorrow, and there is nothing on this earth I could do to stop you. And if you asked me whether Green Street would be better for her, I should have to sit down and think about it honestly, for some time before I answered. Then we understand one another? Not quite. Araminta's legs were shaking. She could feel it happening under her, in the muscle above each knee, and she stood on them anyway, and she did not put a hand on the chair. There is a 4th thing, and you have not mentioned it. 11 weeks ago that child had not spoken to anybody in this house, except to be civil, for 3 years. She laughed on the 14th of January, and I heard her do it, and so did her father, from the doorway, where he stands, because he is afraid of being in the room. You may take her to London. You may cancel the Italian, and burn the drawing, and never receive me anywhere as long as you live, and I shall not write 1 line to complain of it. But you cannot make it, so that she did not laugh. That is done. It is the only thing I have ever had in my life that nobody can take back, and I got it by lying down on a carpet in front of an 11-year-old and letting her tell me I had bent my knee. The Dowager Countess of Stanbury sat perfectly still. Good morning, Lady Drusilla. Miss Vellicott. Araminta walked out of the yellow room and down the great staircase and past the door, with the key turned in the lock, and past the picture that faced the wall, and she asked the butler for her cloak, and she said that she believed the road would be open enough for the gig, and she went out into the snow. She got as far as the 2nd lime tree in the avenue before she had to stop and put her hand on it. Nobody saw her do it, and it was the only thing she was pleased about for a long while afterward. The note came on the Tuesday. Miss Vellicott, the lessons must be discontinued for the present. I am very sorry for it. The quarter is paid to Lady Day, and the enclosed is the remainder. There was no signature. There were 4 sentences, and she read them perhaps 30 times over the following week, and never once got a different meaning out of them, because there was not one in them to be got. She sent the money back the same afternoon by the same boy. She did not enclose a note, because anything she wrote would have been about herself. Sibella found her in the back kitchen on the Thursday, which was the worst of the 11 days for that reason, and asked why she was not at cadre. The lessons are discontinued. Discontinued. Sibella sat on the corner of the table, which she had been told not to do since she was 9. Why? Because the arrangement was always going to end, and it has ended. Minta. Her sister looked at her. Sibella was 17, and reckless, and not in the smallest degree stupid. And there were moments, perhaps 2 a year, when she saw the whole of a thing at once. Was it because of me? Araminta went on working the flour. Why should it be because of you? Because of the assembly. Because you fell down and everyone talked. And I have never once asked you why you fell down, and I have known for 3 months that I ought to. Sibella's voice had gone small. I was on the back stair. You know I was on the back stair. I know you were where you should not have been, and that nobody else knows it, and that nobody ever will. But you fell down in front of 200 people. I did, said Araminta, and it worked, and it is the best afternoon's work I have ever done in my life, and I will not have it spoiled by being talked about in a kitchen. Get off the table. Sibella got off the table. At the door, she stopped. You never tell me anything, she said. You only pay for things. She went out. Araminta stood with her hands in the flour and did not move for some while, because it was the truest thing that had been said to her that week, and it had been said by a girl of 17 who did not even know she had said it. Then she counted. Wednesday, Thursday, which had been a lesson day, and was now simply Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, which was worse, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday again, Friday, Saturday. 11 days. Nothing came. Not a note about a hawk. Not a note about a book. The boy with the pony went past the end of the Marlcote Lane twice on other business and did not turn in, and Araminta saw him go past the second time from the window of the back kitchen with her hands in the flour, and she stood there until he was out of sight. She did the copying. That was the one mercy in it. Bewley and Rouse of Bristol did not care whether she was happy, and had never once asked. And there were 40 folios of a marriage settlement, to be fair, copied by the 20th, and she sat up with it, and slept better than she had in 11 weeks, because there were no hours left over to think in. On the 11th day she walked up the chalk path. It was April, and the snow had gone and taken the frost with it, and the ground was soft and gray, and the path had lost its whiteness. There were lambs in the field below, and one of them was following the wrong ewe and being butted for it, over and over, and going back. She sat down on the old stile where the step was worn into a hollow, and she put her hand flat on the stone, and for the first time since the 8th bar of the second figure, she let herself think the whole thing through from one end to the other without stopping. She had been right. That was the trouble with it. She had been right at Stanbury, and she had been right in the cold parlor, and she had been right in the yellow room, and she had been right every single time, and she had done it standing up, and it had cost her a child she loved, and a man she was not going to name even now, and it had not moved her father's debt by so much as a shilling. Nothing was different. The trust was still short £1,140 less what she had put back. Her sister was still 17, with a green shawl and no season. The house was still cold. She thought about Lady Drusilla saying I laughed, and being right. She thought that being right was a very poor thing to be if you were going to be it alone, and that there was probably a name for what she had been doing for 2 years, and that the name was not courage, and that she did not yet want to know what it was. The sun went. The lambs stopped. She got up off the stile, because sitting on a stile in April at dusk, is how a woman who has not been eating properly finds herself on the ground, and she was not going to do that twice in 1 year. She came down the lane to Marlcote in the last of the light. There was a gig in the yard that was not theirs, and a horse being held by the boy from the smithy. And on the hall table, when she opened the door, there was a hat that did not belong to her father, and her father's voice was coming from behind the study door, being warm, being important, being pleased, being the voice he used with men who lent money. And Mr. Merrick Tolliver's voice was answering it. Mr. Merrick Tolliver had brought a bottle with him, and her father had opened it, and her father's face had the shine on it that Araminta dreaded more than shouting, because shouting passes. Tolliver put it very well. Admiration of some standing. A house at Ludwell with 8 rooms. An arrangement with certain creditors of her father's that a son-in-law would naturally take upon himself. Her father was nodding before the end of it. "No," said Araminta. "You have not heard the whole of it. I have heard the shape of it." Miss Vellicott. Mr. Tolliver put down his glass and looked at her with real pleasure, and she understood that this was the part he had come for. Bewley and Roos of Bristol, 40 folios a month, paid to Mr. A. Vellicott of Marlcote. I had it from a clerk in an outer room for the price of a dinner. Your father has not fair copied a document in 9 years. I looked at his hand on a lease at the bell. Her father had stopped nodding. He was looking at his own glass. "So it is not a threat," said Tolliver comfortably. "It is a piece of information that 2 of us hold, and that a great many people would find diverting. And a wife's affairs are her husband's, and a husband may hold a thing quietly for 30 years. Take a week." He got his hat and went out to his gig. Her father did not look up from his glass. "Whose money have you been taking, Araminta?" And she could not answer it, because the true answer was nobody's, and there was no way to say the rest of it in a small study at 9 at night to a man holding a glass. "I'm going to bed," she said. She was on the chalk path at 7 the next morning, because she had not slept, and he was standing at the old stile. He had walked. She saw that first. 4 miles from Cadre on his own feet through mud, his boots finished, no hat, his hair wrong. He looked like a man who had not been to bed either. "I have not written to you for 11 days. He said it as though it were the first item of a list he had been holding a long time. "I want to tell you why, and 2 more things, and then I shall go, and none of it requires you to answer me." "Very well." "I did not write because I would not send you a letter about a hawk." He looked down the valley and then back. "My wife's mother said a great many things to you in my house, and I wasn't in the room, and every letter I began pretended nothing had happened, and I would not send you a lie in 4 lines. The lambs were up in the field below, making a noise about nothing. She named the provision to you, Clemency and Green Street. She did. She named it to me 3 years ago, and I have never asked her to give it up. She is entitled to it, and I shall not fight her. She buried her only daughter, and she is entitled to be frightened. I know she is. The second thing is her 3 points. He held up one hand and folded a finger down for each, and Araminta thought she had never seen a man do arithmetic on his own ruin. You have no fortune. True. The county will talk, and will follow my daughter into every drawing room in England. True. Your father took £1,140 out of a widow's trust, and was not prosecuted for it. True. I knew all 3 at Stanbury, and I named the settlement I named because I knew them. She is right about all of it. She's wrong about one thing only, and it is not a small one. He put his hand down. She says I look at what I expect. She's right that I did it to Coruscant, and I shall answer for that as long as I live. She's wrong that I am doing it to you. There is nothing about you that I expected, And I am certain of one thing only, which is that whatever is at the bottom of you is costing you something every day." Araminta put her hand on the stile. "Now the third thing. I gave you my word 2 years ago that I would not offer again, and I am keeping it. I came out on my feet at 4 in the morning to tell you that I have not stopped writing because I have stopped wishing to write. If you tell me to stop, I shall stop for good. If you do not tell me, I shall begin again tomorrow about the hawk. That is what I walked here to say." The rooks went over toward Ludwell. "May I say something now?" said Araminta. "Please. I've been on this stile since yesterday evening, and I have got something wrong for 2 years, and I should like to say it out loud before I lose the nerve." She had both hands on the stone now. "When I refused you at Stanbury, I told myself I was refusing your pity. I was proud of that. It was not true." He did not move. "I was refusing to be known," she said. "You offered to settle my family's affairs, and if you had done it, you would have seen the books, and you would have seen what my father did, and that there is a widow in this county who is short £1,140, and who signed a paper she should never have signed. I could not have borne to be looked at with that underneath me. So I said something clever and got out of the room, and I have called it dignity ever since, and it was hiding. Araminta, let me finish, or I shall not do it." She took her hands off the stone. "I copy legal documents for Bewley and Rouse of Bristol under my father's own name, because a woman may not have the work, and Mr. A. Vellicott may. I do it between midnight and 4. I have sent 9 payments to Mrs. Peveril of Combe End, in a hand I disguise, with no name on them. And when I have sent enough, the trust will be whole, and nobody will ever know it was short, and my father will never be a thief in the mouth of any man in England, and that is the only thing I have ever wanted. That is what I could not take your money for. If I had taken it, the debt would have been paid by you, and he would have been forgiven a thing he has never once said he did. And I have £340 to go, and Mr. Merrick Tolliver was in my father's study last night, and he knows the whole of it, and he has given me a week." The valley was entirely quiet. The Duke of Thelbury stood on the chalk path in his ruined boots and looked at her and said nothing at all. Afterward, she thought there had been a strange kind of stillness in him, and she did not understand it for 1.5 years. "Thank you for telling me," he said. "That is all you have to say?" "No, but it is the part that is owed to you first." He took 1 step and stopped. "The rest is a question, and I gave you my word." Araminta Vellicott looked at him across 4 feet of chalk and mud. "You gave me your word that you would not offer," she said. "You did not give me your word that you would not be asked." "No. Then ask me. Miss Vellicott, may I ask you?" "Yes." He asked her. He did it plainly, standing where he was, and he named everything it was not. It was not to settle a debt, and he would not touch the £340 unless she gave him leave. It was not because his daughter had laughed in January, though he would not pretend that was nothing. And it was not to make her safe from Mr. Tolliver, whom he would deal with in any case, and would not discuss with her, then or afterward. "It is because I have had 31 notes from you about a cat," he said, "and I would rather sit in a room with you and ask a question and wait for the answer than write to you for the rest of my life." Araminta let the moment stretch. She let it stretch until she could hear the lambs again, and the water in the ditch, and her own heart. She was not being cruel. She was having it, because she had never in her life had a thing that was hers. "Yes," she said. He crossed the ground between them and did not take hold of her. He put out one hand and waited until she put hers into it, and then turned it over and looked at the ink under 2 of the nails and the callus on the second joint, where a pen sits for 4 hours in the middle of the night. He held it a long time and said nothing about it. Then he lifted her hand and put his mouth very lightly to the back of the fingers and set it down. "Come," he said. "You are cold, and I have 4 miles to walk, and I shall want an enormous breakfast." They were married in the church at Winterset in July, which was too soon by every rule in the county, and which neither of them cared about. The church held 100, and there were half as many again in it. The curate lost his place twice. Sibella was there in a new dress, having been told the truth about the 8th bar the week before, in a kitchen, at last, and having cried in a way Araminta was never able to describe. Mr. Tolliver was not there. His affairs had gone very badly indeed in the spring, and he had given up the house at Ludwell and gone into Somerset in May to live with a cousin, and nothing was ever said about it in Araminta's hearing, then or in the 30 years afterward, and she asked once, and was answered with a question about the garden. The Dowager Countess of Stanbury came, sat in the second pew, and wore dark red. She did not take Clemency to London. She never said why, and Araminta never asked, and the provision stayed in the settlement, unused, like a key in a lock nobody turns. At the breakfast she came to Araminta with a glass in her hand. "Duchess, Lady Drusilla, I said a great deal to you in the Yellow Room, and I do not take one word of it back. I did not expect you to. The county will talk. Your father will be what he is. Every one of my 3 points stands." The old woman looked at her a moment. "You had a 4th. I have thought about it for 5 months, and I cannot get round it. That is all I have to say." She drank from her glass and went to find her granddaughter. In November, a baroness with a great deal of London and very little sense attempted, at a card party in Green Street, to be amusing at the expense of a duchess who had once fainted in a corn exchange. Lady Drusilla cut her dead in front of 9 people, and then stood in that room a further 20 minutes discussing the weather, so that nobody could doubt whose side she was on. That was her way. She was never warm. Araminta learned to be grateful for it. The last thing came in the autumn of the following year, by accident, which is how the important things arrive. She had walked down to Combe End with a basket of apples, because Mrs. Peveril was 80 and alone, and had been kind to an awkward girl of 17 who came to that village with no friends in it. They sat an hour by the fire. As Araminta rose to go, the old woman caught her wrist. "Your Grace, I have wanted to tell somebody about the money, and there has never been anybody I could tell." "What money, Mrs. Peveril?" "It came back." The old woman's face was working. 11 times over 2 years and a half, in little packets, and never a name on one of them. £1,140, Your Grace, to the shilling, which was the whole of what went out of the trust when Mr. Velicott had the management of it, and I never told a soul because I did not know who to thank, and I was afraid if I spoke of it, it would stop. She went to the dresser and came back with a tin. "I kept the wrappers." She put them into Araminta's hands. There were 11, folded flat, and the address on the first 9 was in a careful sloping hand that Araminta had spent 2 years teaching herself to write, and would have known in a burning house. The 10th was not, nor was the 11th. Those 2 were addressed in a plain, unornamented, entirely legible hand, the hand of a man who writes 4 lines about a hawk, and the 10th was dated in the April. She had sat on a stile and told him there were £340 to go. "Whoever it was," said Mrs. Peveril, "he never told me. I have wondered every day since the first of them what sort of person does a thing and never tells." Araminta Hallowell stood in an old woman's cottage at Combe End with 11 pieces of folded paper in her hands, and could not speak at all. "I thought you should know, Your Grace," said Mrs. Peveril, "what sort of people there are in the world." She walked home along the lane with the tin under her arm. She did not run, and she did not cry, because it was not that kind of feeling. She did not mention it that week. She mentioned it in December, when the snow was coming down against the tall windows, and Clemency was asleep upstairs, and he was in the chair on the other side of the fire with a book. "Mrs. Peveril's roof," she said. "No. The trust." He turned a page. "What of it?" "2 payments. 9 of them were yours. You never told me. There was nothing to tell. You had done the work. I signed a draft." He turned another page, and he had not looked up once, and she saw that the hand holding the book was not quite steady. You had been carrying a thing that was not yours to carry, and you were going to carry it until it killed you, and you would have refused a gift, and could not very well refuse a thing you never heard of. Crispin? Thank you." He looked up then. His eyes had the same weight in them they had had in a cold parlor, with a pale patch on the boards, but easier now, and steadier. "You are welcome," he said, and went back to the book. In the spring, the door on the first landing was unlocked. Nobody announced it. Araminta came up from the garden, and it stood open with 2 housemaids in there with brushes, and the room smelled of dust and cold air, and faintly of orange flower water. And above the table the picture had been turned round. Corisanda Hallowell had been fair and round-faced, laughing in it badly, the way people do when a painter has told them to hold still. Clemency was on the landing with her hands behind her back. Papa did it this morning. He did not say anything about it. "Do you mind?" "Not in the least. Tell me again what she smelled of. You told me once, and I have never forgotten it." Clemency told her. They stood in the doorway a long while and let the maids get on. Clemency grew. She got the pony at last, and rode it badly, and then extremely well. She talked so much by 13 that her father was heard to say he would give a great deal for one quiet Thursday. She called Araminta by her name for a year, and then, in a wet March, when she was 14, she came in from the stables saying something about a lame hawk, and said "Mama" in the middle of it, and went on to the end of the sentence without noticing. Araminta did not correct her. She said that the hawk should be looked at, and went on with her letter, and waited until the child was out of the room before she put the pen down. Clemency never called her anything else again. There is a chalk path above Winterset, with an old stile in it, where the stone step is worn into a hollow. She walked up to it in April most years, when she came down to see her mother's grave and her sister's children. She wore the garnet drops, mended in Bristol by a man who thought it a shame to see good work spoiled by a heel. She would put her hand flat on the stone and look down the valley at the hedges coming up out of the gray, and think about a green shawl on a back stair, and the 8th bar of the 2nd figure, and how she had gone down on a public floor to hide one thing and ended by being seen. She had spent 2 years believing that dignity was not being helped, and the whole of the rest of her life finding out that it was being known. He came out to meet her on the path most years because he had heard the gig on the lane. One April, the year the lambs were late, she had been up there a long time, and her eyes were red when he reached her, and she straightened off the stile and said it was the wind, and that she was perfectly well, and that she had merely been standing. The Duke of Thelbury looked at his wife for a moment. Then he put his arm round her and turned her toward the lane, and said, very quietly, into her hair, "Nice try.